Tony Burke is the Shadow Environment Minister and Manager of Opposition Business, and he joins me now from Canberra. Tony Burke, many thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, let's go to energy before we get on to the politics of the day, and there's much of that around. The government's accepted 49 of the 50 recommendations from the Chief Scientist. It is important, isn't it, that any clean energy target be properly thought through to ensure it doesn't further disrupt the energy supply and indeed it doesn't push up power prices?
Oh, making sure that it's properly thought through is logical. The government's argument, though, about 49 out of 50 is sort of like saying that they've built the whole car, they just haven't bothered to put the wheels on it. The clean energy target is what drives a whole series of the other measures that are part of that Finkel report. So we'll look seriously at what's put. What I just heard in that summary in the cross you just did, I'm hearing that for the first time as well. So we'll look at the detail of this. We want there to be a bipartisan approach to this. That's why we came out and said we were willing to negotiate with the government on a clean energy target in the first place. It wasn't our preferred policy, but when the Finkel report came out, we said, OK, we need to have a way of brokering this, but it's got to be something that does, in fact, reduce emissions as well as providing the future for downward pressure on power prices and for making sure that we have reliability. One of the problems for reliability has been the absence of a mechanism that hasn't been there to drive investment.
The other problem, of course, isn't it, that the technologies don't yet exist such to ensure wind and solar generation can be backed up and used when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining.
Well, they exist in different ways, but certainly not to the extent that we'd expect that they'd be coming online into the future. It is the case, though, that's why people also look to gas supply as a form of energy supply where you can more easily turn it up and down based on what you're getting from renewables at any point in time.
Yes, but of course it was your government, wasn't it, that didn't ensure there was a ready supply of gas and let it all flow out in exports. That was a miscalculation, wasn't it?
Well, we knew when the gas export facilities were built in Queensland that Australia would go to the international price. What no one predicted was that we would go to scarcity pricing, that some of the gas companies, or probably one in particular, instead of simply using the export facility to export the gas from the additional acreage they'd been given, went and purchased directly from the domestic supply. And that's why we've ended up in the extraordinary situation now where Australian gas is cheaper to buy overseas than it is to buy in Australia.
Will a clean energy target lead to lower energy prices? Is that why Labor supports it?
We know that there needs to be an investment mechanism, and any investment mechanism that's been spoken about over the years, we've always been told if you can drive investment, then over time you get downward pressure on prices, you get improved reliability, and obviously at the same time you reduce your emissions, you reduce your carbon pollution. So those outcomes have all been part of an investment mechanism, and the concept that the clean energy target would put downward pressure on prices, Josh Frydenberg himself argued that. He took the PowerPoint presentation to his party room saying it would lower power prices. There was modelling done by the Finkel report that said it would lower power prices. That's the government's own report.
So why has it taken so long for them to respond then?
Well, I think that was the other part of the cross that happened. The individual interventions by Tony Abbott, there's a fair bit of division that's been going on about this the whole way through. We offered bipartisan support for a clean energy target, but his own Liberal Party didn't. And that's effectively the problem that we now have, is that Malcolm Turnbull's had to fight his internal war, not just against Tony Abbott, but a small group that's there, that's been dragging him to the right. Their main priority is they want to maintain a fight with Labor on these issues. Now, that's not in the interests of the country. It's not in the interests of anyone wanting to pay a power bill. What people need, and have needed for a decade now, is for there to be a bipartisan approach that gets this job done.
We'll get back to the politics, but I just want to stick with energy for a moment. How do you balance your insistence, this is Labor, but also you personally, given you hold the environment portfolio, how do you balance your insistence on some kind of clean energy target with your support for the Adani coal mine, which Greens leader Richard Di Natale points out, if it were a country, it would be the 7th largest polluter in the world?
Well, none of the approvals for that mine were given under Labor. All those approvals have been given under the current government. The critical decision now in front of Adani is whether or not there's a taxpayer subsidy or taxpayer-funded loan from the NAIF, the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. On that issue, which is the only federal decision now standing in the way of Adani, Labor's position has been crystal clear. We do not support any financial assistance being given to the company for that mine. We don't support any of that at all. Well,
do you support Queensland Labor that have given big subsidies to Adani in the form of royalty holidays?
No, we have said I'm not into the. I don't understand. I haven't gone through the ins and outs of exactly where their royalties arrangements at. But the simplicity of our position has been we do not support subsidies for that project.
So you would be against any such measures given over by Queensland Labor?
Well, I've just said I'm not going to pretend to be across the intricacies of exactly what they've done, but what I can say is federal Labor is opposed to subsidies for the Adani project. But if you're going to
rail against the federal sphere, then surely you'd want to be across what your state counterpart's doing in terms of helping Adani financially.
No, the decision in front of us has been whether or not there would be a subsidy, and we have been completely opposed to that. Bear in mind, all of this, when you're concerned about the emissions of Adani, you also need to make sure that there is a national policy to deal with all forms of emissions. And, you don't want to have a situation, even from the perspective of environmental campaigners, where if they got what they wanted on Adani, but you didn't have a national system on emissions, you just lose it all in land clearing anyway.
OK, let's move on. This week, potentially, we're going to hear a decision in the High Court about the 7 members of Parliament who have citizenship questions hanging over their heads. Of course, the one everyone's looking at is the Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce. In the event the High Court rules against him and he's kicked out of the Parliament, how does Labor intend to deal with that? Would you be conciliatory and give him a pair and cut him a bit of slack?
Oh, look, I can't speak for the Senate, but certainly for the House of Representatives. The pairing arrangement is from a letter between the two whips for the coalition and for us. Now, that pairing arrangement doesn't cover this sort of situation. And let me put it this way. I mean, I don't know what the High Court's going to decide. But if they decide that Barnaby Joyce should not be a Member of Parliament, they've made a decision that Barnaby Joyce has broken the law. Now, there is no way we are going to reward the government with some sort of pairing arrangement if Barnaby Joyce is found to have broken the law.
OK, so the Senate will also this week vote on the citizenship bill. I think that's coming up tomorrow, separate bill altogether, of course, with Nick Xenophon now confirming he won't support the changes. It can't get up, can it?
Well, I hope not. I have made it a habit of absolutely never predicting the Senate.
Or Nick Xenophon.
That's probably true as well. So I won't predict the outcome. What I will say is what's at stake. And there are countless Australians who, if these laws had been placed, say in the days of the Snowy Mountains scheme, who have been good Australians, never would have had the chance to become Australian citizens, never would have been invited to make a pledge of commitment to Australia. There is a lot at stake with this citizenship bill. And we've made clear, both because of the delay and the university level English test, we've been fighting it all the way. If we win this week, I have no doubt that the government will come back and try again, and we will continue to defend the concept of multicultural Australia and a nation that doesn't have a permanent underclass of non-citizens, where if you're here as a permanent resident and you want to make a pledge of commitment to Australia, we've got a pathway for Australia to be able to say welcome home.
We'll whip through one more issue, hopefully, before we run out of time. Now, Tony Abbott says the only way he'd ever return to the Prime Ministership is if he was drafted. What's your take on the prospects of that happening?
I have never understood. If I don't understand the Senate, I'm not going to pretend to understand the Liberal Party room. I will say with the 21st celebration that Malcolm had today, that Mr Turnbull might not have been celebrating the 21st, but I reckon Tony Abbott was. And Tony
and perhaps Labor.
Well, Tony Abbott certainly was out there well and truly celebrating it. And there's no doubt, this is 21, the clock will keep ticking. And if it keeps going through to when we get to 30, Tony Abbott's not going to be quieting down.
But do you think he might be drafted? He said that's the only circumstances under which he'd come back.
I was amazed they chose him the first time. So, as I say, I won't predict what they'll do. Peter Dutton seems pretty keen. But if it goes the way it's currently going, then, we're going to end up with a Prime Minister with absolutely no authority on his own side, let alone the rest of the Parliament. And whether he's even got a majority in the Parliament, we don't know until later this week, probably.
Tony Burke, thanks for your company.
Great to be back.